Lou Valoze, take one, share.
Outlaw bikers, mafia, street gangs, cartels, whoever it is, your job is to gain their trust with the ultimate goal of betraying them. If you make mistakes in the undercover world, it can cost you your life. He was doing bombings, he was doing home invasions, robberies, and he tells me that he can't trust anyone. He sure picked the wrong guy to trust. I said, I'm a federal agent. I just want you to know that it wasn't personal. And he turned and he said, everything you've said to me has been a lie. And you're telling me it wasn't personal? I didn't see a way out because the government was now coming after me. My name is Lou Valoze, and I'm a retired undercover federal agent. The job of an undercover agent is very different than the rest of law enforcement. On a day-to-day basis, you're living with, dealing with, and befriending bad people. Basically, undercover work boils down to how good your game is versus how good your target's game is. That really appealed to me, that I would be pitting my skills against someone else's skills, and the stakes are very high. I went through a lot of different kinds of looks. I had really long hair for a while. I had a shaved head. I'd have 10 earrings in each ear and all that kind of stuff. The majority of my tattoos I got while on the job, while working undercover. I'll just describe one scene. I was drunk out of my mind. I was laying on a pool table, and a convicted child molester was giving me a tattoo on my arm. No cop is going to do that, right? That's the little things that makes the bad guy go, there's no way this guy's a cop. During my time as an undercover agent, I became Sal Nuniato, just a hired hitman, a gun trafficker from the New York area. I never tried to be someone who I wasn't. I just took a part of myself and kind of made it bigger and badder. Because if you try to be someone totally different, that's when you can slip up and make mistakes. And if you make mistakes in the undercover world, it can cost you your life. Sal Nuniato was just kind of Lou Valoze times 100. Just this kind of cold, calculated guy who would do anything for money. He would buy stolen guns where guns were plentiful and cheaper, and he would bring them up to New York where it's hard to get a gun. He was moving drugs, stolen cars, whatever it was. He was a hustler, and if he could make money on it, he would buy it and he would move it. You just fall into that kind of character that you've created from a part of yourself. And when you go home at night, it's kind of hard to turn that off. If you looked into Sal Nuniato, he was a real person. Passports, credit cards, credit history, checking accounts, savings accounts, a whole profile. Sal Nuniato really existed, and which is very important because the level of criminals that I was dealing with, they had the capability to check you out. There were some of them that would hire private investigators to look into Sal Nuniato. So you better be able to pass that test. There was a really, really tough target in Chicago who I was trying to infiltrate. He was a patch member of the outlaw motorcycles gang and also worked with the Italian mafia. He was doing bombings, he was doing home invasions, robberies. He owned his own jewelry store in Chicago, which was just a front for criminal activity, but he had access to resources and information. He even had local police helping him. So it was one of the most difficult targets I ever went after. And my cover in the story was that I was a kind of a down and out MMA fighter. And I was up there at a gym in Chicago and I was helping out with some fighters. I was sparring and training. And so he immediately, after I left, got on his computer, looked up the gym website and didn't see me anywhere. So when I met with him the next time, he had a lot of questions for me. And, I just told him, I said, listen, I don't control the gym's website. You field these questions, you answer them with confidence. If you look taken back and you start stuttering, they're going to wonder, hey, what's the deal here?
And he rotates?
He did. He did not stop questioning me, though, throughout that entire investigation, and that went for a year. He would catch me up a lot of times. He would remember things that I said, and months later, he would question me on it. That's because he was smart. And the FBI had sent 3 people in to infiltrate him. 2 of them were childhood friends and dirty cops. And he sniffed them all out. In undercover work, I always called it befriend and betray. That's the game. You're going to befriend this person or group of people, whether it's outlaw bikers, mafia, street gangs, cartels, whoever it is. Your job is to get in and befriend them, gain their trust, with the ultimate goal of betraying you. This was probably my toughest opponent of my undercover career. I had spent so much time with this guy. I had worked so hard, to gain his trust and his respect in this infiltration, that there was a bond that was created. He slowly started introducing me to his friends who were his criminal associates, all gang members, all mafia members. Then he even introduced me to his family. He had a 10-year-old son at the time. And again, this is a really bad guy, but I think he was a pretty good father. Okay, so, everyone is not, there's very few people out there who are all bad. So the betrayal of undercover work started wearing on me. It was his 40th birthday, and he asked me to come meet him at a strip club. And, we're sitting here and doing some shots, and he tells me that he can't trust anyone around him in his life because he knows people are betraying him. And he really appreciates me being in his life. And I'm thinking to myself, he sure picked the wrong guy to trust. The ATF agents, the FBI agents had asked me if I could lure him to the Hilton Hotel. He was a big MMA fan. He knew I was in that world. And I told him that a very famous fighter named Hoist Gracie was going to be there. I said, man, would you like to meet him? And he was like, I'd love to meet him. First thing, he showed up with his 10-year-old son, which was terrible. And me and my partner met him. We had to get in the elevator to go up, which was very uncomfortable with him because we knew what was about to happen. He was excited. His son was excited. And, our hearts are dropping into our stomach. And when he walked in the door, agents came out of nowhere. They jumped on him. All I wanted to do was get out of that room as fast as I could. They were hoping he was going to flip and provide information. And when they failed, they came to me and said, hey, we want you to go in there and show your badge to him because he doesn't believe you're really a Fed, and get him to talk. And I'm thinking to myself, haven't I done my job? I reluctantly went in there and I said, I'm a federal agent. I've been working undercover. I'm sure you figured that out by now. And I just want you to know that it wasn't personal. And he turned and looked up at me. He said, I let you in my circle. I introduced you to my son, my family, my friends. Everything you've said to me up to this point right now has been a lie. And you're telling me it wasn't personal? If you're working undercover and that doesn't begin to affect you a little bit, you probably shouldn't be working undercover because there's parts of these people that you're dealing with that you're going to end up liking. You're going to create a bond, even to the point where some of these people will jump in front of a bullet for you. And you always end up betraying them in the end. And that weighs heavy.
Should we talk about the storefront operations?
In our storefront operations, we basically had to infiltrate the entire community that we were in. We would concentrate on the areas where there were high gun crimes, high violent crimes. That's where we set up. In order to gain the trust of the real bad criminals, you have to gain the trust of the entire community. because these places were open to the public. People, it wasn't just hardcore criminals coming in these storefront operations, it was members of the community. And we would use, I call it bait, to get people in the stores. We would sell cigarettes a little bit cheaper than the guy down the street. And then once you started getting the members of the community in to the operation, into your storefront, that's when you start kind of putting the word out about what else you're doing on the side. Hey, you know, I think these guys are buying some drugs. I think they're you know, they want to buy some guns or whatever. And the word gets out. The end game was to take crime guns off the street and to lock up the people putting them on the street and the people using them. I made a lot of mistakes during my career. And the biggest mistake I made was Petey. He was a convicted felon, and then his sister happened to come to me and say, listen, as a condition of Petey's parole, he needs a job. Could he work here at your store? And this was early on in the operation, and I'm thinking, what an asset to have someone who all the criminals know who he is, so it kind of validates us and would make our jobs easier. So we hired Petey. He worked our cash register. Never stole a dime from us, by the way. And he ended up unwittingly helping us. He didn't know he was helping undercover agents, but he was. He became instrumental in us getting other people off the streets. He even helped bring in some people, some of the bad guys who sold us guns. I mean, he was a convicted felon. He had done some bad things. But when you sat in a room with the guy, you couldn't help but like him. I can tell you that at the end, there was a lot of sleepless nights for myself and the rest of the undercover crew when we realized that when this operation ends, we all walk away. We're on to the next operation. Petey's going to prison for no less than 20 years. We actually had Petey arrested a day before the big takedown when all the other defendants were arrested. And he absolutely refused to believe that these people who he really considered, you know, amongst now his best friends, were undercover agents who, again, had been lying to him this whole time. And now he was looking at decades in prison. He strung up bed sheets and tried to hang himself. That's how mentally broke down he was at that point. It was one of the only times in my careers I ever went on the stand to ask a judge to give a downward departure to a defendant based on all the assistance. You know, I got shot down by the judge, and the judge's exact words were, this defendant was not helping you because you're a law enforcement officer. He was helping you because he thought you were a bad guy just like he is, and he threw the book at him. My career did not end well. You know, I had definitely run Sal Nuniato's game a little too long. I started making some bad decisions personally at the end of my career. Again, I think I was believing in Sal Nuniato's bullshit. It was much easier to be Sal Nuniato than it was to be Lou Valoze, right? Sal Nuniato, man, he was traveling all over the country. Everybody loved him, running his game, late night drinking, partying. You know, Lou Valoze had a wife and kids, responsibilities, bills. And that led to neglect. There was some infidelity, and unfortunately it was with a federal prosecutor who was handling some of these cases, which led to an investigation. That was essentially the end of my undercover career when that came out. It led to my total mental breakdown. It led to the breakdown of my family. I didn't see a way out because the government was now coming after me. My head was spinning to the point of being in my bedroom alone with my gun in my mouth, just trying to find a reason not to pull that trigger. So as soon as I was cleared of wrongdoing, I retired. It's been 8 years since I left that world. When you look back at the big picture, it's hard to kind of quantify how many lives were saved with the thousands of guns that I was able to buy in an undercover capacity and take off the street, that is my biggest success. And for that reason, I wouldn't change a thing.